Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Outpost Gray. I'm so excited. Outpost Gray is a show where I provide you information in cybersecurity, technology, and innovation. And if this is your first year, welcome to the show. It would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button and became part of the community. All of you that are repeat offenders, thank you and welcome back. Now, if you notice, my background is definitely a little different. I'm not in my home studio. I'm actually traveling right now. But this interview is going to be amazing, and I had to do it live. It was just one of those things. And you guys, when you meet Christopher Miller, you're going to understand why we were wanting to do this interview live. So thank you, everybody, for showing up. I know this is kind of side of the regular scheduled hours. If you are new here, typically I do weekly content on Outpost Gray, so make sure that you check back here. All right, so let's get into it. Why are you all here today? Well, I'm thrilled because I'm going to be conducting a dynamic interview that I can call a friend, a leader, and an American hero. Christopher C. Mill was a lifelong soldier. He spent 24 years in the Special Forces. And if you know anything about my background, I was fortunate enough that I spent about 12 years in the Special Forces. Nothing like what Chris did. And we're going to be diving into some of that story. He served in various positions in the military. He was also among the first Green on ground in Afghanistan after 9/11. Let that kind of sink in. He actually did work and captured genocidal war criminals in Bosnia on top of everything else. And he was also part of a mission called Red Wings. Many of you know this mission as the best-selling book, the blockbuster film called Lone Survivor. He was also appointed to the National Security Council. He actually got to witness firsthand in the White House situational room the Baghdad raid, where he also met President Trump. He then was appointed as the acting Secretary of Defense, where in his most recent book, Soldier Secretary, he recounts the activities leading up to the insurrection on January 6th. And that's just a tiny little smidge of the iceberg. So I'm actually really excited too, because today, February 7th, is actually when Christmas drops. I will be dropping a link in chat so you all have that, but it's called Soldier Secretary. Amazing book. Go and pick it up today. Available today. This is an exclusive, by the way. So during today's episode, we're going to be diving in not only about Chris's background, but we're going to be talking about his book and various different topics. So what I want to do is I want to encourage each and every one of you, ask your questions. I'm not going to have the chat up today, stream side, but I am going to be monitoring the chat. So make sure, drop your questions in there with a big Q so I can see them and we can ask Chris any question that you want. He'll be able to answer it, I promise you. All right, so I'm going to quit jammering over here and we're going to get Chris on the show. You guys ready for that? Let's do this. I love seeing you guys live. All right, make it happen. All right, welcome to the show. Let me change this setting. There we go. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
Oh, Jax, I have a face for radio. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, this is so humiliating and embarrassing. My backdrop. What do you think of my backdrop? I mean, I have to have the classic, the book, and I got all my junk, like we all collect all our stuff. And hey, on a serious note, thanks for having me. When we met, oh geez, what was it, 2-ish years ago? I knew this book was coming out. Could have gone to Rogan, could have gone wherever. And I said, one of the things we do as veterans is we take care of each other. And this is the first podcast for the book drop. And wow, I just really am honored to be here. I actually have a quick question for you. How's tell me about the legislation that you guys are working on to give credit for people that served in combat assignments that normally wouldn't. Can you just give me a quick update on that? Because I love what you're doing, and I hope everybody realizes how important it is.
Yes, absolutely. So what Chris is talking about is there is some legislation that we're working through the Special Operation Association of America. Chris and I are board members for, and the legislation will help female operators, specifically cultural support teams, CST women, a program that I was a part of. There's about 310 of us. And some of the challenges that we face when we come home from combat is receive access to care and treatment. And this bill will give us a combat identifier to be able to receive that treatment and not have to go justify our claim on a continuous basis. So it's going to be great.
Can I get I'll probably get a little teary, but thanks for doing that. It's so
Oh
important.
my gosh.
Geez, Jax, our generation's different. Like, no, if I love the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I love all the other groups, American Legion, they're great. But you know what we've learned from our generation? We're kind of organic, and we aren't into the big holistic thing. We're kind of mission focused on certain things, and it's just like, really powerful to be part of this and to have experienced it. And you better tell the story about that doggone event we did with the Marr Brothers for alternative medical therapies. Oh my gosh, that was insane. And that was kind of where we got to know each other. And you're like, what, you got a book? Would you be on my podcast? What was that? Like about a year ago now. So thanks for having me. I could go on all day, but I just wanted to highlight how important it is and how honored I am to veterans helping veterans. That's what we do. That's going to be the thing of our generation of veterans, is we take care of each other. And just, Rogan, give him a call, tell him I'd love to do a show, but this one's more important, frankly.
Chris, amazing. And I just have to let everybody know the event that Chris was talking about was this event called the 4x4 by 48. You ran miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So let me draw a picture for you. You are not sleeping at all. If you do in one night, you may sleep a couple of hours. And this guy, Chris Miller, ran the entire thing. He was the only individual that ran the entire thing. There were some individuals that started out running and then didn't run at night, but Chris ran the entire thing. It was impressive. So it was awesome.
Further attesting to my stupidity, and I tell my kids, I get these questions like, "What would you tell your younger self?" And my answer is like, "Quit sometimes," because I can't quit. And yeah, that just attests to my stupidity. But the funny thing was, I got down there and I thought, well, heck, I was in a rental car, so I went to Walmart, picked up a whole bunch of coolers and filled them with beer and ice, because I'm like, oh, we'll run a couple miles, have a couple beers, get out there. Everybody's like uber healthy, and I'm like, anybody want a beer? And they're like, no, I'm having my protein shake to prepare. So I felt like a complete schmuck out there, but I drank a lot of beers while you guys were out running, because I frankly would finish a bit earlier, and I'd sit there, and remember how humid it was. And I'd sit there and I'd crack a beer before everybody got back. And then when everybody got back, I'd have like a veggie shake or something. So that was great. It was fun. And then you would get up, we'd sleep for an hour or so. And we were in Ryan's trailer. We had the best setup of anybody. Everybody else is out there in these tents and all. And our buddy that runs Special Operations Association of America, he called his buddy and said, "Hey, bring a trailer." So we had this just killer, nice RV type trailer. And I'd be there trying to sleep. And I would hear these "I'm coming to you live from the 4x4. I just completed my 6th." And it was like we were behind enemy lines, occupied France. And you'd be whispering, and you'd have your cell phone. You were doing it on your cell phone. I was like, it was so fun. But that was an incredible event, because that was another example. It was organic. And how many? There are 8 groups out there. None of them big, none of these $400 million freaking, excuse me, did I sort of curse? You're not supposed to do that.
You're fine. Yeah, you're fine.
And it was all these organic groups, and it was all about helping veterans with alternative therapies and all. And I got to tell you, I was a little skeptical. I was like, what? And then to meet people that had been so profoundly impacted in a positive way by all that, and then to see the advancements, it was just so cool. So, all right, you got a bunch of questions, and I'll be quiet now. I'm just giving a shout out to you and what you're doing. I really appreciate it. My great backdrop.
You're awesome. This is out. And then, everybody, just so you guys know, this backdrop was specifically purchased for this interview. We did that on purpose. And let me know. I changed my audio. I know in chat are saying that Chris sounds fine, which honestly, if I'm choppy, it doesn't matter as long as Chris sounds fine, because really the show's about him. But
hey, I'm doing my branded content, you know, having my sip of bubbly water, seltzer water. No, it's not branded content. I just know that I'll be talking and I hate doing this. So I get little branded content for whatever it is. Giant.
Good old bubbly. Yeah. Giant. Okay, let's jump into okay. So, you know, most people have like 6 to 10 questions for an interview like this, Chris, and I have 7 pages, 6, 7 pages, but we'll get through all of them. He said still some feedback popping off the new mic as well. Thanks, Philip. All right, I'll try to do as best I can, guys. Sorry, my audio is so terrible, but Chris is what matters. But thank you, Philip, and thank you, Mel, for letting me know. All right, so let's jump into this. So you wrote the book called Soldier Secretary. I would love for us to kind of kick off about why did you have the desire to write this book, and talk a little bit about the title, because you mentioned in a book why you came up with the title Soldier Secretary.
Well, you know, that's a loaded question. I'm just such a, you know, I try to be a humble person, and, you know, talking about myself is really, really uncomfortable. And I'm being brutally honest, but hey, you got to do what you got to do. And I kind of want to help where I can with Veterans Affairs and what's going on in our armed forces. Here's the bottom line. I enlisted in the Army Reserve in 1983. Then, you know, went to college, ROTC, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, I served in uniform to 2014, and then I became a government contractor. I went to the Pentagon because my wife wasn't going to move. She was sick of moving. So we stayed here. And if you're in a government town, what do? You go into government. So heck, became the scummy government contractor that I'd always made fun of. It was good. I became that and learned how that worked. And then I took a government job, like just GS, civil servant job. And due to friends and buddies, I ended up getting assigned, you know, detailed, like not what do they call it? There's a word for it. I got loaned from the Pentagon to the National Security Council. And then one thing led to another. I could go on all day. Nobody cares. I ended up getting a political appointee position. So I end up getting transferred from the civil servant, just like any government employee. I became a political appointee because I was obsessed with killing off Al Qaeda. Wasn't having much luck, and I needed more WASTA, you know, bureaucratic WASTA. So I just was looking for jobs that could continue to advance, where I could get more control and more authority and more resources to go on this vision quest, if you will. So this kid comes to me and goes, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was like, "I have to go back to the Pentagon. I've been here on my 2-year detail. I'm literally just dreading it. I couldn't imagine going back to the Pentagon." He said, "Just a second." And this was a guy who everybody kind of made fun of. He was a younger guy. Nobody knew how he fit in. He actually was one of the most powerful people in the doggone White House, and having had worked for President Trump in the campaign in Iowa. He goes and gets me a job as a political appointee. I'm saying too much, but at the end of the day, to answer your question, I left government because when the administration flips at 12:01 on the 20th of January, 2021, I was out of work with no job offers, no opportunities, and had to do something. And so I cashed out. And on top of that, Jax, I'll overshare. You know, people that serve in the military for a career generally aren't going to get rich. And my family and my wife and I had spent a lot of money on our kids to make sure they were provided with opportunities. So I was in debt. I was, you know, seriously in debt. And this somebody called and said, "Hey, would you like to write a book?" And I was like, "I need some money." Yeah. And then honestly, you know, that's just kind of the pedantic thing. But the real reason, you know, having that opportunity, we'd always been brought up that if you have to pass on your lessons learned, that's what we do in the military. Remember, that's like sacrosanct. And I said, well, I have an obligation to the next generation. It sounds kind of hokey, I know, but I felt that way, that I needed to pass on some lessons learned. And that's kind of the goal of the book.
Yeah. And if everybody can, like, just listening to Chris and hearing his story, you're very authentic. You beat around the bush, and your book is very much that way. Like, you're very authentic in your book. And something that I really loved about your book is how you started out talking about your desire to and your influence of joining in the military, and you were just very raw about it. And there was this what I found really interesting is there was this pivotal point in your life that really made that trajectory for you to like, I'm going to join the military. You actually mentioned it a couple of times. And you talked about the male influences in your life, the male figures, how they had gone to war, Vietnam War. But the thing that really had inspired you to be like, I need to go military was witnessing the botched rescue job of the 1980s Iran hostage crisis. And you mentioned this a couple of times because it really impacted you. And you make it sound like this was like a pivotal moment where you're like, that's it, I'm joining the military. And then you went to the recruiter's office at 17 years old and you're like, I'm going to join them at an amazing ASVAB store. They were like, you can do anything. And you're like, well, I just want to like, I don't know how you said it, but you wanted to go to basically. And so they put you in for infantry. But like as you progress through your book, you really talk about a lot of different traits like leadership and really facing your fears. Like, was that kind of the purpose of your book when you started writing it outside of just, generating money and helping your family? But I mean, because it has a lot of life lessons in it, Chris.
Well, I was like back in the day, you only 3 TV stations, and my dad would come home from work and he's like, "You're not watching what you want. You're watching Walter Cronkite Evening News." And so you're like, "What am I going to do?" And then on the weekends, it wasn't like cable TV. You could watch whatever you wanted, or DVD or Netflix or anything like that. So I read a lot, and those books, I read a lot of biographies in history, and I was kind of steeped in the military history thing. And I just, it was really powerful for me. So, and I learned a lot that I passed on. But one of the things, I had a buddy, when I told him I was writing a book, he goes, "Chris, do not write that book where everything went great. All what the talking heads do, and like the big wigs, they always like, oh, and my poop didn't stink, and I was the God's gift." And I'm like, that's not how the stuff really works. That's not how our business works. That's not how government works. And I think it gives like an imprecise representation. So when you're a young person and you're a squad leader, or you're a platoon leader, or a company commander, or a company sergeant major, or a first sergeant, I was hoping, I know nobody reads anymore. Like maybe there'll be some excerpts on TikTok or something, and the kids will like, "Oh, this is good," or they'll listen to it on, or something. But I just kind of wanted to set the different context so people know what to expect, because I just remember, like, you watch the war movies and you read the war books and you're like, everything's moving really fast and, everything's happening in, nanoseconds. And then you get out there and you're like, half the time you have no idea who's shooting at you. You have no idea where it's coming from. You're just absolutely confused, and I know a lot of our listeners appreciate that. And I was like, wow, that's not how the books were. That's not how the movies were. You always know where enemy fire is coming from. So that was kind of the goal of the book, was try to pass a few of those lessons learned on, but more importantly, kind of give my perspective. And I just speak for one person. I speak for me. I don't speak for our generation or anything, but I thought that was kind of what I wanted to do.
Yeah, and I want to touch a little bit about like being in combat, what that looks like, what that feels like, especially from the lens of a special operator like yourself. And you talk about this, but I think it's the listeners that may not know what it's like to even be in the military, much less a special operator. Can you take a couple minutes and just kind of discuss? You joined Special Forces in 1993, you went into 5th Group. You even touched on the different missions that 5th Group had, but I don't think individuals that are listening understand what is Special Forces, what's different between being a Green Beret versus a Ranger. And I know that's a very that's a lot of questions, but I would just say very broad strokes, Chris, explain like what it means to be a Green Beret, and you were a Ranger as well, and means to you, and what that looks like going in combat versus just regular conventional military.
I'll get hate mail from everybody and my phone will blow up. But here it is. Special Forces are the Green Berets. They're designed, created for one thing: go behind enemy lines, a la going into occupied France in World War II before D-Day, or just behind enemy lines, meeting with the local people and raising guerrilla armies to overthrow the existing power on behalf of the United States or our allies. So to be a Green Beret, you learn languages, and it's all about cultural, like understanding the cultural nuance. Rangers love them to death. I went to Ranger school, wasn't in a Ranger regiment. However, pretty comfortable. They're commandos. They're direct action people. They go in, they break things, kill people, blow things up. That's their greatest skill, love them to death, and nobody does it better. But special forces are, so 12 people on a special forces A team go behind enemy lines and link up with friendly forces and help advise, train, and assist them, and then help them fight. So 12 people behind enemy lines, alone and unafraid is kind of the motto. And we had never really done this. And lo and behold, Afghanistan was the first time special forces, and I think we were like 50 years old at that point, had actually went behind enemy lines. So that's what we did when when we decided to take out the Taliban and Al Qaeda after they attacked us. A whole bunch of us, well, about 200 of us, and some intelligence officers from the CIA went behind enemy lines and linked up with the Northern Alliance and other resistance groups that wanted to overthrow the Taliban and rid Afghanistan of Al Qaeda. So you flew in, you dropped in behind enemy lines, linked up with these partisan forces, these surrogate forces that were there. And we actually did, it's called unconventional warfare is the doctrinal term, but I kind of described it. That's what we did. Hadn't been done before. A lot of people said, oh, we don't need this anymore. This is like so old school. And thank God we had some leaders that wouldn't let the big military get rid of it, because it was exactly what we needed after our country had been attacked. Did that answer? Was that any good, or was that horrible?
No, that was amazing, Chris. No, it was perfect. I do want to touch on one mission that you talked about that I think some individuals may be aware of. If not, they can Google it. Actually, going to drop the CNN link to this operation. And you talk about this. And if I remember correctly, as I was going through your book, because it's very like in some ways it's chronologically aligned from like how you entered the old guard. Really, basically, you were at a stage where you're like, I want to go to war, but you kept hitting roadblock after roadblock, and you were starting to feel like a failure in a lot of ways, as like, I'm not really, like, you even resigned your commission 24 hours before 9/11 happened. And then 9/11 happened. The next thing you know, December 5th, you're in Afghanistan. First day, you break your foot, basically stepping off a plane, hit a hole, break your foot. Don't tell anybody. Stay in country. And then the next thing you know, and I'm fast forwarding, you plan this 15-minute operation to go into a hospital to expel Al Qaeda fighters. That took a 12-hour firefight that then ended up on national news. And this, like, in your opinion, was that really the first time, like, was that really kind of a pivotal point for you to realize, wow, war is a lot different than I suspected it was going to be at that point in time?
It was such a genius plan. I've been in the Army, like, I think 14, 13 years. I've been to all these schools and, like, done a lot. And it was just a brilliant plan. And, that classic line, the plan does not survive first contact with the enemy. I was like, nah, that's not true. I'll be fine. Like, rehearsed it, made people memorize everything. And then, we roll in there. And the plan, my favorite part, and Doug knows who he is. I was like, hey man, I don't want to get in he was going to lead us. We were going to go in behind the hospital so the enemy couldn't see us, and it would be like a surprise. And I knew the kind of road network gets confusing. So I said, hey, it was Paul actually. I said, hey, Paul, you good leading us? He goes, I'm fine, sir. I'm fine. I said, hey, the way I used to do this back in the day, and I know I'm old and I don't know what I'm doing, but I would have taken some infrared chem lights, those the things you snap that you see at concert events and whatnot, but they're infrared, so you can only see them with your night vision goggles. I would mark the whole route, so I make sure that I don't take the wrong turn. Sir, you don't know. This is a new generation. We got this. So we're driving in that morning because what we wanted to do was I wanted to attack right at morning prayers, because I knew they'd be out of their rooms at that point. And I just like, I see the turn we're supposed to make. We don't make the turn, and we drive right in front of the target building. And I see the lights literally flick on. These dudes, are at the windows, like, looking at us, and I just kind of wave as we drive by. Paul jumps out. They put out outer security, outer perimeter. We were right by the CNN building too. Like, that's where they were sleeping. I knew this, by the way, because we did our, intelligence preparation of the battlefield. And at that point, you're like, oh, well, I guess the surprise isn't going to work. And it just went downhill from there. And the lesson I learned, again, I asked the guys that were on this mission, I'm like, why did you guys let me be such a moron? They're like, sir, you had to learn at your own pace. And we knew you were a good guy and we weren't going to let you fail, but you're the kind of guy who just is experiential learner. And I'm like, oh, thanks a lot. That was great. And at the end of the day, you know, the genius of was a couple warrant officers and NCOs were like, all right, this has gone to crap. You know, sir, move out of the way. We're going to take care of it from here. And at that point, I was smart enough to go do whatever you want. But yeah, that was kind of a transitional moment for me because that was the first, you know, true combat operation I'd been on where we are going to go, you know, capture, kill people. And the other thing, Jax, the biggest thing on that one, Al Qaeda. We really thought at the time that we would capture them, like, oh, they'll give up as soon as they see us. The power of America, they're going to surrender. Nah, we're like, they were going to fight to the death. And I'm like, why don't we just go up and just like put a rocket through the window and end it in like not 15 minutes and like 30 seconds and drive away. But hey, we had to learn. That was part of the process.
Yeah, again, a lot of lessons learned out of just like life lessons in your book that I really enjoyed. But there were also, Chris, you had some controversial things in your book, in my opinion. Like you hit some pretty hot topics, and I want to touch on one of them. Because obviously some people will disagree, but one of the things that you talked about is when you were out of Afghanistan and you were doing this really big, another pivot in your career, how I saw it, you left Afghanistan and then you deployed Baghdad in 2003. And I started noticing that your mind started to shift at this point in time in the book. And you started like, in a way of questioning is the right word, but you started thinking, and that made you start questioning leadership, and you started asking yourself, why are we invading Iraq, a sovereign country that hasn't even attacked us? And so I found that very interesting because that could be a controversial topic to a lot of people, but you weren't afraid about that in your book. And I want to know, why did you see that was something that was so important to you? You needed to put that into your book and write about that topic.
That was a heavy one, yeah, where you realize we went in there for specific reasons, and they were not accurate, and I couldn't square the circle on that one. And you know, I talked about reading books. There was this when we were younger, when I was a lieutenant. The book that was going around was this book called About Face by David Hackworth. And he was seen as a heretic, and he'd gone to Vietnam and he'd lost faith and wrote this really scathing indictment of leadership. And I was like, that'll never happen to me. And then, you know, I came out of Iraq. It was right before July 4th. I can't remember what year, 2004, probably. And my family was gone and I just was alone for a bit. And I just really had to think through what had just happened to us as a country. And that was started to separate me from the common narrative and whatnot. And I just had to think through it. And, you know, they teach you about just war theory. People laugh about it. Like they teach you that stuff at you get it too when you learn about ethics and morals in the military. And gosh darn, that matters. That's kind of what we want in our armed forces, right? People that think about things. And that one, yeah, that was the one where you're like, I mean, it was an amazing operation. So operationally, it was great to be part of that, you know. But at the end of the day, you're like, ooh, we went to war for false motive on that one.
Yeah, you actually. I'm going to quote your book. I was proud of what we had achieved professionally. It was truly the most masterful invasion of U.S. military had ever conducted, but at the same time, it was one of the most costly and disastrous foreign policy blunders in American history. I mean, and you really, this was a point where you
can argue with me, but I think that's when we do the scorecard, it's going to definitely be in the top 5, if not the top 1. And you just can't, you know, it's not good, bad, or indifferent. It is what it is. But that's kind of one of those things where when this nation goes to war, you know, it's for real. And you know that. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. But, you know, part of the book, Jax, is also like, only 7% of our population serves. That's fine. That's a good problem to have, right? I mean, thank goodness we're not an armed nation anymore, because we have been in the past. 1% serve on active duty or in the reserves and guard. That's a good problem to have. But I've noticed, like, there's a separation. Like, we know how it works, and then a lot of the population now that we serve, or you all serve, doesn't have such clarity on the purpose of the armed forces. And it's not like the bumper sticker I always give. It's not a video game. It's not Halo. It's not, Call of Duty or anything like that. It's actually really serious business. And we need to take these decisions about going to war a lot more serious. Hey, we all agree there are times when we have to go fight. That's totally cool. But let's just make sure we're doing it, deliberately and for the right reasons. That's what I'm trying to get at. I don't know if it resonates or not. That was another reason I wrote the book, because I was really frustrated. I was concerned, not frustrated. I was concerned with, how things were going.
Yeah, in your book, so as your book goes on, and we'll touch on this when I get into some national security questions. Neil's dropping great questions in the chat, so thank you, Neil, for that.
Seeing these pop
Yeah,
up, yeah.
So later in your book, and I think this is important to touch on, and then we're going to pivot into this because it's something that So was passionate about, and there's a lot of organizations that are working on this aspect. But you discuss the physical and mental aspect of being a combat veteran and the injuries that plagued our soldiers today. And in your book, you actually talk about one way that you helped yourself to heal, and it was by running. But then as you were running in your book, you were running, and I'm reading part of your book right here. My running odyssey ended after snapping something in my ankle, the same ankle that you had snapped on December 5th when you were going into Afghanistan, running the Appalachian Trail during the 2017 JFK 50-mile race. So you had this injury. This was your way of having your therapy and just cleansing your mind with all the stressors that you had. And that happened. What did you do after that? You injured yourself again. Now you're not able to run. You had to start dealing with the demons.
No, I kept running. Not running now. I was like too stupid. Yeah. Oh my gosh, I got that compartmented syndrome, which is funny, but went to the doc. Oh well, I could go on all day about that. Yeah, but that was, everybody has to deal with, kind of process it differently. But yeah, that's where I got out of my system. And talk about like the symmetry of running. I talk about running it out of my system and then breaking the same ankle. Or I didn't break it, like something popped and I went and they're like, come back for an MRI. It swelled up, but I think I just did some ligaments or tendons. Too much information, I know. But yeah, the symmetry of that whole thing was pretty amazing. Where you're like, this is I couldn't have planned it like this. So okay, that answered your question, or was that I just
yes. No, you did good. You still run, even in the book. You running, like when you injured your foot in Afghanistan, you didn't stop in the race. You kept running. That's just the makeup of like who you are, and you see a lot of individuals similar makeups like that in the special ops, in that community, because that's the type of mindset that you have to have, especially when you're working under the amounts of pressure that you have on a continuous basis, which you talk about in your book.
But Jax, the key point I was trying to make about, everybody deals with it differently, but this is the first war we're one formation, and this is not a criticism of the conventional military. Everybody served, but really at the end of the day, one formation, special operations, did the heavy lifting, and we have no data. Everybody deployed again and again and again for 19 years, and we don't have any data. Like, there's no historical data on how many that affects people's endocrine system, physically, mentally, psychologically, religious, all these factors. So that's why it's so important what we're doing, what you're doing and others are doing, to recognize that. And, I got a ration of junk for elevating special operations in the Pentagon from being kind of like at the kiddie table to elevating them to report directly to the Secretary of Defense. I know it sounds bureaucratic, but like, holy cow, our special operators need that sort of attention. So we don't know, but the nice thing is what we talked about at the beginning is we've got wicked smart people that care about helping each other. And we're going to get to the bottom. A lot of ideas coming up, but that's why to keep pushing on it because we do not know what the long-term effects are going to
Mm-mm.
be on people that did 20 years of war.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, unfortunately. Okay, so we're going to pivot. I know some individuals are ready for some national security questions, but I want to paint the picture and kind of how you became the former acting SecDef. So in 2017, you were appointed to the National Security Council, also known as the NSC, as a special assistant. That's when you at least when I was reading, that was really kind of the pendulum that kind of opened the door for you. You got into the Pentagon, you had this position. That position allowed you, well, I wouldn't say just that position, your personality as well got you into that situational room during the Baghdadi raid, where you then met President Trump and other individuals. And then from there, do you feel like that position is one of the things that led you into becoming the acting
Yeah, it sounds so cliche, but I just used I still get questions like, "You're dumbass? How did you end up doing that?" I was a Green Beret. It was pretty simple, figure out the network, figure out the incentive structure, what motivates people, communicate up, down, laterally, and then execute, execute, execute. And I just used that process. And also you just love trying to figure out systems, right? That's what special operators do. So I was like, yeah, I'll figure this one out. And lo and behold, I figured it out. But I became obsessed with Al Qaeda. And because I wasn't a counterterrorism guy, like direct action, that wasn't my thing. I was always like, let's learn about the culture. Let's learn about what motivates these people and how to manipulate. Yeah, it's really what it is. Manipulate them to, achieve our objectives without having to punch them in the face or shoot them. There's time and place for that. I'm totally good with that. But I always took the indirect approach, it's called. So, I looked at Al Qaeda and I was like, we can beat Al Qaeda. We can defeat Al Qaeda. And I became obsessed with it. So was the other, process. So I was like, we need to get our government behind this again. And that was really why I just put the rucksack back on. And then I honestly, we sit around the team room and, or you sit around the squad bay and complain, if I was in charge, what this is what I do. And all of a sudden I'm in charge. And there were some things I wanted to get done, like helping out on some veterans issues, that Karshi Khanabad in Uzbekistan, that toxic waste pool. There were some people, Jim Moriarty was killed in Jordan, should have gotten the Medal of Honor. He was, I don't know if it was blue on blue, green on blue. I can't keep up with all that stuff, but he should have received the Medal of Honor, and due to political reasons, he got a Bronze Star for valor. And I was finally in a position where I was like, hey, let's see if we can upgrade that. And then stuff like that, trying to help out. That was the big goal but it was all about Al Qaeda.
Yeah, and you did make a huge impact in both positions, and that's what I found really impressive. Even when you stepped into two things I want to touch on when you stepped into the Secretary of Defense position. The first thing I really love this, and because I hope I'm like this one day. When you walked into your office, you were talking about the two tables that you had in your office that were just amazing, and they were passed down. I can't remember exactly, but passed from generations of other general officers. I mean, these are you had a cush office, and you walked in, and you even stated like you were not intimidated. All you mentioned, most people would have imposter syndrome, but I walked in and I was confident. And I was like, that's the Chris Miller I know. But why do you think you were that way? Why do you think you walked in and you were like, yeah, I can do this. I got this.
Oh, that's big. Well, Jax, I used to go into jobs when I was a commander and a troop leader, and I was always intimidated, and I always had imposter syndrome. I'm like, how am I going to pull this one off? I'm the youngest guy here, and all these people have this more experience. So it's not like ego that happened that day, but I've been in the service for so long. I had worked at the Pentagon at every different level, from a bottom sucking contractor to other things, and I had this huge network of people that I knew that I'd worked with all around the Department of Defense. And frankly, I'd hacked the system. I knew how it worked. It wasn't that big of a deal. So to go in there and somebody, I think I tell it in the book, like the first thing they do are all these generals come in and they're like, we have to brief you, and they take you to the secret room, and I'm like, oh, I know what this is about. This about nuclear codes. Like, duh, we're going to do that. So I get in there and they're like, this will be a 3-hour briefing. I was like, is this about nuclear war and stuff? And they're like, what? Yes. Code word stuff. And I'm like, I got it. No problem. Understand. Something goes down. I got it recommended the president. They did a scenario. I was like, got it, good. And they're like, no, what are we going to do for the other 2 hours and 55 minutes? And then they hit up, then they're like, we have one more thing to brief you on. And I was like, oh, is this related to terrorism and what we might have to do if we're attacked again? And they're like, yes. I'm like, got it. I'll make the call. Easy day. And I wasn't being, they totally took me like this guy's out of control, but it was serious. It was like, what the hell do we expect? That's what the Secretary of Defense's job is. Like, oh my gosh, I think they expected me to go like, I can't do this, and I'd go running out of the building. I mean, come on, like let's be legit on this. So yeah, I didn't experience that. I knew how the place worked. I knew how the things were, so it wasn't intimidating.
Yeah, efficient. I like it, Mel. This is definitely efficient. Yeah, I love that. And I actually, it's interesting that you said ego, because I actually had ego written next to the question, because a lot of people, and I know you, and it's not ego. Like, you're probably the least egotistical person that I know. And if anybody watching this, if you read the book, you will agree with me once you actually go through and read the book. And also, you can pick the book up on Amazon. I'll drop the link in chat. All right, so let's jump into a couple questions that Neil dropped in here. Love Neil Bridges, friend, mentor, also the founder and creator of Cyber Insecurity, a very, very active cybersecurity community. And as you know, Chris, I'm big into cybersecurity. So I know some of my followers are going to want to know your professional opinion on national security, specifically related to cybersecurity. So Neil's question here, I really like this. He asked it when you were talking about just the overall explanation of the soft roles and breakdowns. And in your time as the acting SecDef, how did you see the evolution of cyber play into national security, and specifically like the soft mission set? And I want to add one thing to that. Being in the soft community as an electronic warfare and cyber officer, and I left the soft community a couple of years ago, it was still in some ways an uphill battle, because it was kind of restructuring the mindset to realize we're leaving conventional or guerrilla war and needing to move into a different space like asymmetric. But I'd love, from your seat, how did that look for you?
Oh gosh, I'm not going to give a good answer. We advanced so far on cyber during the war, but we were left like with this idea that there's so much more we could do. And so this is a great question. And Title 10, you know that better than I do. There's huge opportunities there. Or, Title 50, Title 10. Oh, yeah, that's DOD. I got it. It's been a while. I'm a businessman now. Yeah, so the efforts by the last administration to reduce the bureaucracy and to increase the speed of coordination for cyber activities, I think was a game changer. Please argue with me. I want to highlight that those interagencies discussions, which were all about, pushing authorities down to the warfighters and to the cyber warriors, was really, really opposed by the Department of Defense. We need to recognize that. Now, they're the biggest supporters now. They're like, oh, and I love to hear the stories about people that are the biggest supporters now. I'm like, you are the biggest resistor. But I thought we made really, really huge progress in that with some of the presidential documents that were signed and have been used. So I think we made a lot of progress, but I don't think we even come close yet. And your question is, I was only in there for 73 days. I got it, but I was extremely focused on this, particularly towards Al Qaeda. And here it is. I'm just going to say it. Creation of Cybercom has muddied everything. So we've got all these problems where the J39s that are information operations officers are confused about the role of Cybercom. And we have General Nakasone and his people who are dual-hatted. And so I think if it was a 9-inning game, we're probably, I think we're probably in the top of the third, bottom of the fourth. We're not very far along. We got a long ways to go. And I don't think we've really integrated it. I really don't think we've integrated appropriately and effectively. And so what's it look like in the future? I got a lot of confidence in the new generation, the generation that's out there doing this now. But we still have a whole bunch of old timers, white haired people like me that, say they get it. But when it comes down to it, they're always going to buy a tank as opposed to, uh, or an aircraft carrier, as opposed to increasing our proficiency at cyber and information operations, which really means at the end of the day, you guys can argue with me, it's a personnel issue. And, they're still like, oh, we need more fires brigades. I got an idea. Let's get rid of a couple fires brigades and let's take those positions and let's convert those in to information operations specialists. And let's literally create, and we're starting that. I know that, but it never is fast enough. I can go on all day. You triggered me. Sorry. I think we made some progress, but we haven't even come close to tapping the potential of our workforce in this regards. That's me. That's what I think. Okay.
Neil agrees 100% creation of cybercom money to everything. Yeah. And he also states, it was that way when I was there with General Alexander, being both DERNSA and U.S. Cybercom.
Got to split
what
them.
is that? Director of NSA. Sorry, both director of NSA and Cybercom.
DERNSA, yeah. Got to split them.
Is that what that is? DERNSA? Okay.
Yeah, director NSA. Yeah, that's like,
yeah.
Hey, okay. I'll just frequency hop. Like, holy cow! Like that's the most powerful. That's the most powerful position. Maybe it's the most powerful position in the world. And that we need to separate those two out. And it's in my book. DERNSA needs to be a civilian appointee. Cybercom can be military person. Make the deputy DERNSA a military person because we got to integrate our warfighting functions. Blah blah blah. But no, the most powerful spy in the world should not be wearing a uniform. It needs to be under civilian control. It needs to be appointed by the president. Period.
Do you think they should have some military background though to be in that position? Civilian, but military background. Do you think that's irrelevant?
I don't know. I mean, make the deputy do that and have a cyber professional do it. Have somebody from industry. That's what I go with, but nobody's asking me. But it's in the book.
It is in the book. Everybody's going to have to pick up the book. I'm going to drop the link in there after I do this next question. Oh, so next question on Neil, because I'm going in the order. Mel, I see your question too. I'll grab that next. So you mentioned Al-Qaeda and lessons learned. He was conducting a Title 10 active duty as part of the Cowie in 2011 and 13 time period. What do you think about some of our cyber learnings were in that endeavor?
The thing I learned was let smart people, give them the authorities they need, give them the resources they need, and let them go. And keep the lawyers involved, but not driving the train, and let smart people figure it out, and they will absolutely get accomplish the mission. End of story. And come on, we had to create a lot of wiggle room, recognizing that there was an mission that was required, and a lot of the authorities and stuff was not in alignment. So we did a lot of waivers and cutouts and figured out how to do it because we had so many commanders and their subordinates that were focused on protecting America. Sounds like soundbite. It kind of is, I guess, maybe. But at the end of the day, like, geez, commanders need to be well educated, but at the end of the day, I think what we learned when we unleashed the power, the creativity of our members of our armed forces that are specialists in this field, amazing things can happen. That's what I learned. Probably not, you probably wanted like, oh, we need to change, Army or military DOD policy, such and such. Yeah, I think we need to do all that. And hell, okay, I'm frequency. I mean, Jax, you're not going to have me on again. It's like we need an overarching information operations strategy and policy from the United States. Right now, it's just kind of cobbled together. Like, there's paragraph here, there's paragraph there. We need to have one overarching, because we got at the bottom, we're great. We got great people. At the top, there's nothing. In the middle, so what's the middle do? The middle's just confused. We got to put in the top piece. And I'm not a strategy policy guy. I think a lot of times it's silly. It's an excuse for wasting time and resources. But in this case, for information operations, we have got to have an overarching national whole of government strategy document that people can start plugging in and they can build their resources off and see what authorities they need. That's me.
100%, 100%. And I'd love to have you back on the show to discuss that because that's something I'm very passionate about, actually. And there's a national cybersecurity strategy that's supposed to be coming out in the next couple of days. We'll see. That's supposed to help with some of that, but we will see. That's for another show. I do want to ask one more question from Mel, and I want to ask you a couple of questions, and then I know we need that because you got a hard hit right after this. So, question from Mel.
We can Shark Tank it. Go. I'll just like boom.
Okay, I love it. All right. So, based on her research, she's very concerned about the powers and the cybersecurity around it. Are those concerns justified in your opinion? She's talking about, I think she's talking about, say, a possible cyber attack happening to one of our power grids and the vulnerabilities of those systems.
I am not an expert, but my Shark Tank answer is yes, and then some. You're right in line, and it's something we have to be really, really concerned about.
100%. Yeah.
You can quote me in your page.
It's definitely an area. Yeah. I love that. Okay, I want to do some closeout questions for you. And then we're going to do a quick wrap. So as the SecDef, within 73 days, what was the best and the worst day that you had as the acting Secretary of Defense?
Best day was when the president signed an executive order requiring the Veterans Administration, the Department of Defense, to get serious about our veterans and our serving active members of our armed forces that have been poisoned at Karshi-Khanabad and were being denied benefits and medical support. Worst day was, going up the Dover when a helicopter that was out there in that Sinai mission that's been going on forever crashed and killed a whole bunch of his coalition forces. And going up, I'd been to Dover a bunch of times, and I'd done tons of notifications to family members when their loved one had been killed or died. But still, at the end of the day, that's the one that, sticks with you. And I'm involved in all this silly political nonsense happening. And then, with that in DC is life and death for some people. And then you go up there and you see the treasure that people have given our country that was expended, and you see their families and how devastated they are. It's just, that's it. You're like, we are so fortunate as a country to have people that are willing to serve. And that's the worst experience by far.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Chris. Okay, so let's do a quick wrap. Let's talk about your book really quickly. I already Amazon links, so everybody go check out the book, but are you going to be doing a book tour? What's next for you? How could somebody reach out to you?
Yeah, well, they know you, so they can reach out through that. I'm supposed to be on, God, it's hilarious. I had to go on Twitter. The publisher's like, you have to go on Twitter. I'm like, Twitter's silly, but I'm on Twitter. But yeah, it's the book. Yeah, I'd appreciate it if you kind of take a look at it. All I wanted, you got a laugh out of it, right, Jax?
Oh my gosh, there were times where I was laughing so hard on the plane. I'm pretty sure just looking at me, it was great. Yeah, it was good.
I want to have some laughs, but I really hope people will take a look at it and pass it on. Because, it's about our future and love feedback. How do you get a hold of me? I'm on email. I'm like, wherever, call me. I don't care. And they know you. So I just want to make sure that we're talking truth to power as we go forward. And
yeah,
we got to fix this system. It's like out of control. We're spending way too much money. We got to spend smart money. We got the people that know that down in the trenches. We just need to give them their voice. That's what I hope.
Yeah. Awesome. Chris, I cannot thank you enough. I know you got to hit.
That was a horrible wrap up. I know you're like, you gave me like the slam dunk. You're like, Chris, go ahead and say your piece. I'm like, I don't know. I wrote a book and no, I'm just, what I would like to do is be able to help you all out, be of service. I mean, being a selfless servant, that's what we do. That's the way we're raised. And, I got to that point. Oh man, I got to tell you, they talk about, servant leadership. Some people call it a religious thing. It can be if that's what you want. I'm just talking about servant leadership. When I figured out what that meant, unfortunately, I was 36 years old. I hope that I know you guys are way more switched on than I am, but when you realize that it's not about you, it's about helping other people and helping them succeed and giving them opportunities, it's like rocket fuel. It changes your life. And so that's what I want to do. And if there's something I can do to be of service to help out, that's kind of what I want to do. That's kind of what the legacy I want to leave behind. It's not a book. It's about, helping out people that are in need.
Yeah. Yeah, your book is awesome. I love the read. I read it in like 1.5 days. So, and I read a lot of hours. For like 3 hours, it took me around five or six, but that's okay. All right, we're going to drop. Thank you guys. Thank you all again. Make sure to stop back by here this week for new content. And I'll be dropping some short clips of this video in the next 1 to 2 days. We're out.
Thank you.
Bye.